And one by one, these things fell, in the same way that as you go through life, you close the door on Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and so forth and so on as you move along toward adulthood. But then I discovered that the psychedelic dimension seemed to be an exception. That it was as though the tidy world of European positivist culture derived from Calvinism and Greek science and so forth and so on had this umbilical point, this place where it was all tied together. And if you untied it completely deflated and you were left staring into something analogous to William James' description of an infant's world. You were left staring into a blooming, buzzing confusion. Well, what is that? What are the implications of that? It wasn't a confusion chaotic enough to be simply mind dissipated into thermodynamic noise. I think a lot of people who have never taken psychedelics have the idea that it's thermodynamic noise, that it's just the brain isn't working right, it's firing randomly, and then some portion of it is trying desperately to lay gestalts of meaning onto this random firing, and so you get this kind of surreal careening from one supposed illusionary perception to another. Anybody who's taken psychedelics knows this is not a very apt or cogent description, that actually these things reveal scenarios, modalities, hierophanies of emotional and poetic power that are very emotionally moving, and sometimes leave in their wake powerful ideas as powerful as any of the ideas that have moved and shaped civilization. So my motivation in talking about these things is that I do not say that this is the only path out of the mundane coil of blind casuistry and entropic degradation. I don't say it's the only path out. It's the only path I found. And I checked some of the other major players, but checking doesn't mean I exhausted them. I mean, perhaps yoga can deliver this. Perhaps Mahayanist metaphysics can deliver these things. Perhaps I was impatient or lumpen or simply not intelligent enough. But the good news about psychedelics is that they are incredibly democratic. Even the clueless can be swept along if the dose is sufficient. Yes. Well, so that's just a little bit about it. And other things that are very interesting to me, as I said, are the future, but the future in some specificity, both the rationally apprehendable future that we get when we extrapolate current technologies, current tendencies, and the not so rationally apprehendable future when we actually turn on all the bells and whistles of the historical process and realize that it is inevitably ramping up into more and more hypersonic states of self-expression, and that this is what is creating this end of history phenomenon, or this eschatological intimation that now haunts the cultural dialogue. There is something deep and profound moving in the mass psyche, driven by historical forces long in the process of unfolding, but now exacerbated and focused by new communications technologies that are essentially prostheses, extensions of the human mind and body of enormous and unpredictable power, or with unpredictable consequences. So, in a sense, what began for me as the psychedelic experience, a personal experience triggered by a relationship with a plant based on certain definable pharmacological phenomena, has become like a general metaphor for understanding being in the world and our historical dilemma, because in a way they're fractal adumbrations of each other. I mean, history, call it 15,000 or 25,000 years of duration, is the story of an animal, some kind of complex animal, becoming conscious and staring out then into a kind of universe of infinite possibilities based on what consciousness can do in the realm of energy, matter, light, time, and space. Well, so in a way, the psychedelic experience is like a microcosmic reflection of that. You start from baseline, which is your ordinary lumpen or not so lumpen, depending on who you are, state of consciousness. But wherever you start from, it lifts you up in a process of evolutionary unfoldment that is squeezed into hours. And it goes on entirely in the evolution of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. And it seemed to me for a long time, at least since I read McLuhan and assimilated his notion of tools as things which have a feedback into how we see the world, it seemed to me that the psychedelic state was then like a predictive model for what human history wanted to do. Human history wants to break through all boundaries, to somehow have a realized collective relationship with deity, or that which orders nature, or some fairly large concept like that. Yeah, the implications. It's all in the implications. It has to do with how much intelligence you bring to it at the beginning. You know, if there's no mind behind the retinal screen, then it's just pyrotechnics, mental pyrotechnics. But it's how much we can make of the phenomenon that makes it so rich. Yeah, you mentioned the gratuitous grace. This is based on a famous comment by Aldous Huxley. He was asked at one point, what is the psychedelic experience? And he said it's a gratuitous grace. And then he explained it is neither necessary for salvation nor sufficient for salvation. But it certainly makes it easier. You know, it's like an aid. It's a cul-de-sac. I mean, we can't suppose that it's necessary for salvation because too many people have gone from birth to the grave without it. But one has attained a very fortunate incarnation, I think, to be in a culture, in a place, in a time when psychedelic knowledge is available. And it's a kind of paradox that in our own time, meaning in the last 100 years, all this information has arrived in our laps as the hubristic enterprise of white man anthropology carried back all these medicine kits and mojo bags and sacred plants and so forth and grew them in university botanical gardens and kept the stuff in locked drawers. It was like a Trojan horse brought inside the city walls of Calvin's Troy. And, now the genie is out of the bottle. I'll have to restrain myself from these long exegetical comments on each person's